From historical housing issues to today, Kamala Harris made her case for the presidency last week at the Democratic National Convention, and she zeroed in on a problem plaguing many Americans: housing. She vows to end the national housing shortage, lower the cost of rent, and make homeownership a more easily reached goal. Here's her campaign's new ad that details her housing plan.
We will end America's housing shortage by building 3 million new homes and rentals. We should be doing everything we can to make it more affordable to buy a home, not less.
Joining us now with more are Don Washington, Executive Director of the Chicago Housing Initiative, and Ted Dabrowski, President of Wirepoints, a nonprofit focused on research about Illinois' economy and government. Gentlemen, welcome back. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Let's start with why. Let's start with what you think of Harris's plan. First of all, do you think it's effective? Ted Dabrowski, let's start with you.
Well, I think you heard her say that the government wants to help bring prices down, and I think the first thing we need to understand is the government's done a lot to make those prices go up a lot. When we closed the economy during COVID, we got massive supply chain issues that pushed up the pricing of houses. We lowered interest rates to 0, which made demand increase for housing. That pushed up prices. Then rates went to 7%, mortgage rates. That made housing even less affordable. So the government has created a lot of the affordability issues. So if now they want to put more money into it, the minute they hand out $25,000 to each household, demand will go up, prices will go up. You have an affordability issue. So I think we need to focus on the supply much more than on the demand side.
Don Washington, same question to you.
Well, let's just start with a very simple thing here, right? What is housing, right? What is it? When I say housing, what do you think that is? What is that for you?
Obviously, it's where I live. It is a house. It is an apartment. It is shelter.
Right? It's shelter. But what it really is a necessity. So by definition, right, there are some people that no market can ever serve. Does that make sense? There are some people that will never have enough money to be housed by a market. A market-based solution, by definition, means that some percentage of Americans will be permanently homeless. So we have to think about housing in a completely different way. All this business about inflation and percentages and interest rates, all that business is not as important as what is the baseline for making sure that we're actually housing everyone. Our affordable housing situation here in the city of Chicago is a crisis. Let's say that there actually was a market-based solution, which is what we're actually using at this point, right? We are 150,000 units of affordable housing short, period, under the present paradigm. Kamala Harris's plan doesn't have enough details for me to actually tell you what's going to happen, but I can definitely guarantee that the situation we're in now is a manifestation of markets that cannot be solved by market-based solutions.
Why, sticking with you for a second, Don, why home ownership as a focus of economic support or recovery? Why not something else? Jobs?
Well, so this is the thing. We think about home ownership. Homes are thought about as an investment, right? It's a way to build generational wealth. That's how we think about a home, right? But that's because we've been market poisoned. We think of a home as a way to make money, right, that we can pass on to other people, as opposed to what it should be, as a place where they can live, where they can build lives, and where they can participate, right, in society. So even if you aren't, quote unquote, building wealth, you're a renter, you should be able to afford to participate in society. So we should start with the core proposition that Harris should be starting with is, how can I create a system, right, that meets the needs of those who are locked out of the existing market? Because if we did that, it would lower the cost of housing for everyone.
So, Ted, built into this plan is a $40 billion innovation fund. It's supposed to incentivize the construction of new homes by supporting housing supply solutions, expanding tax credits for affordable rental units. Would that be a good push for the private housing industry to start building more homes?
Yeah, so I want to say one thing. I think Don and I would agree that there is a bit of a housing crisis. Look, prices have gone up a lot, and that's locking a lot of people out of affordable housing. No doubt about that. And I think across the country we have a massive shortfall. That said, the question is, how do you fix it? And the question is, do you start spending more, do you start doing tax credits? Tax credits means more spending by the government. I would argue that there's some very basic things that we must do in Chicago that we do poorly. And, we have too many regulations. When you put too many regulations on building a house, no, I think you probably agree with me. The more regulations you put on building a house, the more you increase the cost, the harder it is for the people we're talking about.
When you say regulations, what are you talking about? Because people say regulations like it's some sort of magic fairy dust. What do you mean by regulations?
Well, there's different kind of regulations. Like, for example, you can use this amount of land to build on, and this amount you can't build on, for example. Or zoning, for example. Imagine if we zoned more areas of Chicago for multifamily housing.
But why do?
Because then you could build more. I'm just saying that you could build more housing.
That could be true, but
it could be true.
But the way that we're talking about regulations and zoning, it's not like the way that people talk about it is that regulation increases costs, and that therefore slows down housing. That's not it. The other thing is that we cannot build our way out of this, right? You just don't build more housing, because if you build more housing in a market system, you're still just going to create people who are on the outside of the market.
Well, I think there's two different discussions, right? There's housing in general. There's a lot of people who are being locked out of housing, even middle class, middle income families that are being locked out because of the price.
But that's a manifestation.
Right, but I'm saying,
that's a manifestation.
Right.
I'm sorry.
We have a problem because we're locking out too many people, ordinary people, not just the poor people. Now, the poor people you're talking about are the people who are low income and struggling. They really do need to be helped in a certain way. And there's special ways to help them, but what we have to be careful of is not to try to do everything to the market where we mess up the market, and then we have which is what's happening now.
But let's talk about like middle class people. What's really happening is we have a concentration of wealth that has reached the point where people with so much more disposable wealth can do things like buy blocks of real estate. And so we're seeing a thing where there's like high income rentals that are being managed by slumlords. And so now, like, people who are like two-income couples who have $100,000 apiece are getting a taste of what it means to have a landlord who's from like Canada or some huge corporation who is treating them to like broken toilets. They're getting a chance to taste that. So we got to break up the concentration of wealth.
That does sound like a discussion for another day, because I think our friends they've done Injustice Watch, who've done a lot of reporting on this and the problems with rental housing in Chicago. Right. But I want to get to one thing, because I want to keep this on the presidential election if we can. Trump previewed part of his housing plan and his economic plan at a rally in Racine earlier this summer. Here's what he said.
I will also stop inflation by stopping the invasion, rapidly reducing housing costs. They're taking over our hotels.
All right, so not a whole lot of time left, but Ted, some communities feel that the arrival of our asylum seekers is exacerbating the city's pre-existing housing crisis. Do you think closing the border will help increase the available affordable housing?
Well, look, I've spent a lot of time looking at the black unemployment rate in Chicago, highest in the country. Poverty rate, second highest in the country. You can't say you want to solve a problem like housing when at the same time you have an open border where these are poor people who need things, but we're inviting a bunch of people into Chicago who don't have the income, don't have the means, and they're able to take some of the housing that would ordinarily go to our residents, those in need. That's not what's happening. That's just not right.
Well, I mean, to you, Don, is that the case? Are asylum seekers, are they eating into the housing availability and driving up prices?
These are two different crises.
These are millions of people, Don.
These are two different crises. Before the first asylum seeker ever showed up, we didn't have enough affordable housing in the city of Chicago, right?
Is it worse?
We have the resources. We have the resources to house everyone. So let's make this very clear. How many times have you heard about the Ukrainian crisis for housing, or the Ethiopian crisis for housing?
Sounds like another.
Or the Sudanese.
Another question for another day.
Hold on a second. You ever heard about?
But I can't hold on a second. I actually do have to go. I do have to wrap. I apologize. Thanks to you both, Don Washington, Ted Dabrowski. Thanks for joining us. And we're back to wrap things up right after this.